one return and another absence.
Kansas crushed by Creighton. Is this an indictment on the team?
Things go from bad to worse in Miami for the Lakers.
There's nothing like a showdown in the AFC West.
Texas is in the SEC championship in year one with a big rematch coming on Saturday against the Georgia Bulldogs.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports. You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers, Matt Derry, Locked On Lions, Ford Field, Thursday night for Detroit and Green Bay. Give me some keys, Pete. What are you looking at that will make the Packers split this season series?
The key to me is turnovers. If the Packers win the turnover battle, and in this case, that means forcing a turnover from this offense, it is everything against this Detroit Lions team. When they turn the ball over, they are 16 points per game worse than when they don't. They average 40 points per game when they don't turn the ball over. That is an absurd statistic. Now, that's also colored by the fact that, they turn the ball over a billion times against the Texans and still won, right? Like they can win even when that happens. But the Packers are not the Texans. They're a better football team. Jordan Love is a better quarterback than CJ Stroud. I don't know what other evidence you need to see. Watch the games, please. But that's the key to me, because I threw this out on social media, on Blue Sky, on Twitter. I posted the box score and I said, from the last game, and I said, tell me who you think won this game. And the overwhelming response was the team on the left, which was the Lions, by a touchdown. Now they win by 10, right? But the narrative was that was a blowout, that was a domination, that the Packers were down 3 scores into the fourth quarter. And that the last part is of course true, but it was the one turnover that became a touchdown that really decided the game. That's the difference in the game. And so
that was a killer. If
you don't do that, the Packers held the Lions defense, or the Lions offense, to 17 points, under 5 yards per play. I understand it's a monsoon, but who runs the ball on opponents when they're up better than the Lions? No one. So, and the idea that they took their foot off the gas when they throw halfback passes, and they're throwing, like they ran Penei Sewell on a reverse pass last week, Matt, the idea that they would take their foot off the gas against the Green Bay Packers when Amon-Ra St. Brown wears a Green Bay Sucks t-shirt to the arena.
Yes.
Give me a break. The Packers defense played really well in the second half of that game. They kept them in it. I think that the turnover piece of this, if they can just create one and don't turn the ball over, that's the key to me. What about you?
First of all, that Green Bay Sucks t-shirt, I did say on my show that night that shirt was kind of lame because it was misspelled.
Yeah, Green Bay is 2 words, guys.
Correct.
Just so we know.
Correct.
And we do need to mention, Xavier McKinney was asked about that at his locker yesterday. He said, we're not worried about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or he said, we're not worried about that dude. I don't think he meant like we think that guy sucks. No. I think what he meant is we're not worried about him trash talking. We're not worried about what t-shirt he's wearing. Like, we're focused on the game. And that is true, Matt. I have to just give your audience a little bit of insight here. I've mentioned this on our show. This Packers team, by all accounts, in that locker room this week is locked in. They are dialed to this matchup. And so they truly are not worried about any of the external stuff. They are focused on winning a football game. This is a business trip to Detroit. And I think that is part of this too. You have to meet, if you want to beat the Lions, you have to meet their focus and their precision, because right now this is the most focused and precise team in the league. A credit to Dan Campbell and those coordinators. I stepped on your key. Please give it.
Well, no, 2 things. Number 1, red zone defense, which we talked about before. The Lions have been so good.
Elite. Yep.
They're holding the Packers to field goals.
1 for 4 in the last game, the Packers in the red zone scoring touchdowns.
Yeah. Well, they were all split. I mean, the Dolphins never win in the I actually was dumb enough on our Locked On NFC show last week, which we missed you, by the way. I said something like, I think the Dolphins finally do it. I was like, that was the dumbest prediction of all time. That's number one. So
At
red zone
the end of the first quarter, you're like, ah, crap.
I know. And the number two, remember this name, Al-Qadin Muhammad. Many people don't know who that is. All right. But they're going to need him to rush the passer because I think the Packers are going to know where Zadarius Smith is. Khalil McNeil is who he is. He's amazing and a beast. But they need some pass rush from Muhammad like they got last game, just off the edge because of all the guys that are gone, all the guys that are hurt. Sounds like Pascal's not going to play. So Muhammad becomes a guy that has to game wreck a little bit because if Jordan Love has time and was comfortable a year ago at Ford Field at Thanksgiving, Lions couldn't touch him last Thanksgiving. And he lit him up. So those are two big things for me is holding Green Bay to field goals and getting some pressure on Love. Muhammad will be key to be one of the guys that does that. So
the red zone defense is if it was not going to be turnovers, that was going to be mine because I mentioned that 1 for 4. I wrote about this earlier this week for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for everyone to subscribe to, that if you look at what happened in those red zone trips, the Packers miss Chris Brooks wide open on an angle route. Jordan Love, passes a little behind him. Josh Jacobs probably makes that catch. He might walk in for a touchdown. They have to settle for a field goal. Then Jordan Love misses Christian Watson on a first down play. And then Elton Jenkins throws the ball at Jordan Love's feet. The backup, he's the guard that had to play backup center. They have to settle for a field goal. And then Dontavian Wicks on 3rd and 1 drops the pass. They go for it on 4th down. And Josh Jacobs gets stopped. That's the game. That's the whole game is those 3 possessions in the red zone. And I think the Packers are going to have a better plan this time around. I don't think they're going to drop, depending on where you look, 8 passes. They had 4 dropped 3rd downs alone that would have given them 1st downs. I think you're going to see a focused Packers team. And I think this is going to be much like last year where these two teams split. I don't think there's that big a difference. Especially right now with the way the defense is. I think this is like a 27-24 kind of game, a 30-27 kind of game. And I think Green Bay gets it done. I think they have the right mindset. I think it's going to be a really, really good game, a potential classic here coming on Thursday night.
I'll say this, Kirby Joseph will get an interception. He always makes a play against Packer quarterbacks. Doesn't matter who they are.
He sure does. Packers might have to bring in Malik Willis just to avoid it. Just to see if they can switch the juju up.
I'm going to surprise some people here. I'm going to take Green Bay.
Wow.
And I know it's coming, and I know the commenters on YouTube, and I know Peter Bukowski haters are going to go, oh my God. The Lions are really good, and I still think they're the better team. I think they're better than the Packers, but I think this is a lot to overcome. Another short week, 3 games in 12 days, a lot of guys out. You mentioned Tucker Kraft and LaFleur loving to eat linebackers for lunch. And if it's David Long and Ezekiel Turner and Jamal Adams playing linebacker when he's never played linebacker before, I'm a little hesitant this week. I'm actually going to agree with you. Oh boy. And I'm going to say something like 34-31.
If someone from Locked On or Tegna is listening, can we make sure we get this clipped?
I even wore the shirt. I mean, come on. I got the swag and everything. So, I think Green Bay squeaks it out. I think it could be like a 34-31 type of thing, but I know what I will be at Ford Field too. So I know it's coming when I get there. Just be nice when you see me, everybody.
I think what's going to happen, and I predicted this before, one of these fan bases is going to be furious that they didn't win this game. I think that's it's going to come down to 1 or 2 plays at the end. And I think the problem for the Lions is their defense is so banged up. And when Aaron Glenn, his whole thing is, we can disguise and we can play fundamentally sound and all that stuff. The more you switch out pieces, that continuity it gets really, really hard. And the Packers are not having that issue right now. Jair Alexander has practiced for 3 straight days. Romeo Doubs has practiced 3 straight days. They're getting healthy at the right time. The Lions are going the other direction for teams that are pretty evenly matched. And I agree with you. The Lions, when they're fully healthy, are probably the better team. They're not fully healthy. So you have to play the game with the team you have. You got to dance with the girl that brung you, right? So I think that's ultimately why the Packers get this win. And we'll see in January if these two teams get a chance to do this again. I hope you and I get to do one more of these this year.
I have a weird feeling you guys are going to end up like the 6th seed or something, and then
divisional round.
And then obviously the lowest seed faces the 1 seed. And if the Lions are the 1 seed, and I think they will be, we could be doing this all over again at Ford Field. We got to get you to Ford Field. What do you think? Can we make this happen?
Let's try. Let's try.
Call David Locke, call Ross
right.
Jackson. Let's
David,
go.
are you listening?
All right, my friend. Well, all the best. It's been great to see you. You've behaved again. We haven't
We'll
fought.
see.
Nothing's
We'll see.
happened. So we'll see what happens. Just stop with the trolling.
I won't. I will not.
Jeez. I mean, come on.
Lions fans are much harder to troll, I will say, than Vikings fans. Much easier to troll Vikings fans, Bears fans.
Here's another thing we can agree on. We got to keep Ben Johnson out of Chicago.
Yes. Well, they're not going to pay Ben Johnson. There's nothing about their history says that they are going to foot them. I said recently, I think if Ben Johnson wants the John Gruden, but half, like 5 years, 50, I think he'll get it. Kyle Shanahan, I think Kyle Shanahan gets like $14 million a year. I think he could ask for that. I think he could ask for 4 years, 60 from someone, and I think they'd pay it, but it's not going to be in Chicago.
It's funny. Kevin Warren the other day, and he's a bit of a clown, said, "Oh, we're going to have the best job this offseason." What if Todd Bowles gets fired? That Tampa job's good.
Way
Like
better.
there's going to be some good jobs out there, better than the Bears job. The Bears never do any.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You can always turn a profit on a game between two sub-500 teams if you want. The Pacers head to Brooklyn to take on the Nets and are slight favorites. FanDuel has Indiana laying 2 points for tonight's tilt, if you want to call it that. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
One return and another absence.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast.
We are doing another one of these shows again, Brendan, where we're discussing another player getting injured after what should have been a pretty good Suns win. Like, they looked pretty good through most of this game.
Took care of business.
Like, this is a Spurs team. I had to remind myself so many times in this game, Brendan. Oh, wait a second. This Spurs team's 11-9. Obviously, they're 11-10 now. Like, they're not a bad team. They might be a playoff team this year. Now, we'll see. And also, and the Spurs team, they've got dudes. Harrison Barnes, Victor Wembanyama, Chris Paul, Stephon Castle, who's decent, Zach Collins, Jeremy Sohan, who is so up and down. But Keldon Johnson, like, they got guys. Like, this is not a – you forget. They're like the Suns team of, like, 2019, where they were kind of plucky, right? And so it was a good win, but just frustrating that we're talking about another injury.
Yeah, we will talk about some of the nuts and bolts of the win, Book getting to 15,000. Oso Ighodaro gets the start. A lot to break down here, but let's start with our moments of the game, as we always do. What do you got for us?
Yeah, my moment of the game was I have to find exactly what time it was, and I wrote that down, so I should have had that ready. But it was the Mason Plumlee block to Devin Booker's three-point shot in the end of that, or towards the end of that third quarter. The 10:56 point in the third quarter where Plumlee blocks, I forgot who it was on one end, and then Booker comes down the other end, puts a three, puts the Suns up 11. And at that point, that's when I felt like the Suns, I believe it was 94-83.
Yeah.
That was the point for me where I was like, oh yeah, the Suns are going to win this game. It's just a matter of how much. And then you're doing the NBA Cup score, watching, you're trying to see if they get into that, because we care so much about them getting into that. But that right there was where the game was won. A Plumlee block on one end, quickly with pace down the other end. Devin Booker splashes a three, which is what I thought, okay, the Spurs just don't have the firepower. Also, Victor Wembanyama was just not good in this game. So that's where it was for me.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things where Oso starts this game, and that's its own story, which we'll talk about. But the biggest point in the game, I was going to go somewhere similar. I have another one we can get to. In the fourth quarter, where they basically kind of woke up and really, put the game away, it's Plumlee who actually he had a lob dunk to start the quarter off from a feed from Monte Morris. I think maybe 3 of his 4 blocks were in that fourth quarter stretch before he checked out. And so nice to see. I mean, you said it yesterday when we were talking about predicting accurately the Oso start. You were like, Plumlee's just better off the bench. And for whatever reason, maybe it's just that he's playing against backups. I mean, he did play some against Vic, I believe. Maybe it's just that it's a confidence and a rhythm thing for him, but it was absolutely that way. You throw in some big Booker moments as a scorer, and that was kind of enough. I mean, you like the Spurs do have guys. I absolutely agree. But this is a team that they should just take care of business against, and they did. I have something, though. Did you text your wife your moment of the game?
Yeah, so I wasn't going to be able to pull it up in the stuff over here. Because when you are pulling up your things very quickly, you're just like, you type in planning and it all pops out. So in the moment, I didn't want to lose it. And I was doing something else on my phone, and I just texted it to her. And I go, hey, disregard that.
Yeah.
That is, I need that for later. And then I typed it into here, but it's
just funny because you were like, hold on, let me pull it up. And then you're like in your text
with
I wasn't
your wife. I was not going to try to pull it up on here.
I was just impressed you got there. I'm saying I was like.
I don't text anyone else besides you and my wife.
What is he doing here?
Yeah, but I knew I gave it to her. You saw me reach her over here, and then I was like, no, I'm not even going to do that. So, I texted it to my wife. She asked what that was for. She has no idea who Booker is. She has no idea who Mason Plumlee is. But yes, 10:58 in the fourth quarter.
She's a notepad for the night.
She does the same thing to me. I don't know if your wife does that, but she will
I text
send
myself.
Me
you can text yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't. Listen, Brendan, I have a really bad memory. I had to go back.
That's fine. You were in there when you thought of it, and that was the best place to put it.
That's the best place for me to put it. But I understand as I was opening it, I was like, Brendan's going to see this.
Well, now the whole audience knows as well.
It was a little embarrassing, but very funny.
My moment of the game, and we got to just get here, Kevin Durant getting hurt.
Yes.
So
yes, obvious.
Just over halfway through the second quarter, about 4:30 mark, he is running down the court, left ankle, just stereotypical turning of the ankle. There's, Cam Cox from 12 News put a photo out of it. There's videos. I mean, nothing obscene, but definitely serious. Mm-hmm. Grabbing at it. He plays on it for a couple minutes, but then for the last 2-3 minutes of the quarter of the half, he's out and then never checked back in. The Suns ruled him out, calling it a left ankle sprain, not soreness or just left ankle or any kind of shenanigans. Like he sprained his ankle. And I'll just say this, obviously you get the win, but this was the game, I would say, where, at least with Bud, the exhaustion with this injury thing seemed to get through to him the most that I've seen it. We're at that point in the year where we also haven't even said, I said it at the very beginning, but we haven't even talked about this was Bradley Beal's return game from missing one, and now it's another guy out. So it definitely felt like it was kind of getting to Bud in a way that was new for me.
Yeah, so I'm not in those pressers. We're obviously splitting up a lot of these things. That is interesting. The Coach Bud Budenholzer, what am I, Matt Ishbia, but Coach Bud would have that sort of reaction because it feels like he knows what he signed up for. But Brendan, we are 20 games into the season. We've had multiple Kevin Durant injuries. We've had multiple Bradley Beal injuries. We've had injuries to guys in and out of the lineup. Last night we talked about, I told you about just my plan to move Bradley Beal to the bench because he just can't stay healthy, and not because of his play, not because he doesn't fit.
Yeah, you kind of kicked Beal and Nurk off the team yesterday.
I was
a crazy episode.
I was ready to kick everyone off the team. I have a group chat as well with my buddies where we just talk Suns, and I obviously wasn't participating in it tonight, but one of them said in there, they're like, just get rid of Bradley Beal, just get rid of Kevin Durant. I don't think this is true. I think this is fandom talking. They said they're useless. And I'm like, that's the level. No one actually thinks that. That's just emotion talking, but the level of exhaustion that obviously Bud is exemplifying, but the Suns fan base as well. I wanted to pull up Cam Cox's photo. The very first response is, I've seen this one. Is a gift that says, I've seen this one. Where it's just like, I don't know what to say, Brendan. I'm running out of things to say about this team's injury luck 20 games into the season. Without Kevin Durant, we know the record. I can't remember exactly who they have coming up. Clearly, we don't have those games scheduled yet. I think there's a possibility that it's nothing. It's just exhausting, man. And it's frustrating because if he just turned his ankle 20 games in the season, if that was the only thing we were dealing with, whatever, it's basketball. Guys are going to twist their ankle. I do it every 5 games I play, and I don't play in the NBA. It's just another thing, man. And we shouldn't get so upset about it because it is just an ankle. And it's anyone can do
And we don't know how long it'll be.
No, we don't. But it is telling that they labeled it as an ankle sprain. As soon as I saw that too, I was like, geez.
Yeah.
We're doing this again.
Yeah, so, he didn't have a prognosis on anything. Nice that it's the Pelicans on Thursday. I mean, you should beat that team even if you had no stars healthy, frankly.
You want to talk about a team that's not healthy.
Yeah, and then Miami on Saturday, we'll see and cross that bridge when we come to it. But, yeah, just a bad way to be back to this square. I mean, it's not square one. I mean, it's been 3 seasons of this. Like, people think just last year, but if you remember before the KD trade, that year was also completely decimated, even more honestly, I would say, than these past 2 have been by injuries, with Cam Johnson's, ripping his freaking muscle off the bone, and Chris Paul missing time.
That was crazy.
DeAndre Ayton. Crazy. I mean, it was like everybody, and we're right back to it. So I get it. We get it. They're not useless, but it sucks when you can't even celebrate a win because another guy's out.
It was a really good win. It was a good win. It's the
kind of win we were asking for all throughout the first couple of weeks, where we were like, can they just take care of business against the team? And they did that tonight.
I texted you before the third quarter. I can't remember. I was like, you got to put these teams away. Can't let teams hang around. And I was worried that we were going to get a Suns game where the Spurs come back and win this game because the Suns let them hang around.
Yeah.
That clearly did not happen. That's what we should be talking about. But instead, we're talking about another injury. Though it's an ankle, it just feels like it's always something.
Kansas crushed by Creighton. Is this an indictment on the team?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Is this what this team is? Like, is this team, did they show a lot of, Achilles heel in this one? And you might be saying, oh, well, the bigger sample size, they beat North Carolina and Michigan State. North Carolina just got smashed by Alabama. They're sitting at 4-4. How good of a win really was that for Kansas at this point in time? The Michigan State win. Michigan State's been fine, but they haven't been that great. Now, the Duke win, that one seems to be holding up very well and shows the ceiling of this team. But is this going to be what the floor of this team is? That the ceiling, we know they can beat some of the best teams in the country. They showed that a little bit last year, but that the floor is that you are going to be in danger when you go on the road, similar to last year's team. And I think that's what was unfortunate about this. It felt like, Kansas didn't just lose this game on the road. Like, I mean, shoot, you look at the 2019-20 team that was the best team in the country. They lost their Big 12 Big East game at Villanova, but that was a close game. This was a blowout, and that made it feel a lot like, last year's results when things weren't going well for you. And just like everything went wrong for KU in this game. Kansas only shoots 36% from the floor. They only shot 36% on 2-point shots, which is their worst since the 2022 season. Ironically, the game that they had the worst 2-point shooting percentage, they shot under 30% on twos. That was in a win over Texas on senior day for that national title winning season. So I don't know, maybe that's actually a good sign. But they only shot 36% on twos. They actually shot 35% on threes, 8 of 23. Only 5 did at the free throw line, didn't get to the free throw line very well. So you weren't getting to the free throw line. And part of that was, in the first half, I think it was a little bit about you weren't like driving to the rim. I think you were going for the shots that they wanted you to take, which were those little push shots, the floaters, which we talked about in the pregame that was okay. The ones that I didn't like were the out of system or DeJuan launching up a billion shots or the contested mid-range shots. You're not going to get fouled as many on those. In addition to that, the refs were horrible in this game. The whistle was incredibly one-sided, and Creighton kept getting away with push-offs and everything. That didn't decide the game. Creighton still, whooped Kansas in this one. But that obviously wasn't great. And so you have those things going against you. You're not shooting well from twos. In the second half, you felt like you said, hey, we didn't take any layup attempts really in the first half. Let's force the issue. Let's take some layups in the second half. And they were just like, okay, we're going to play vertical defense and we're going to play good defense. We have good rim protection. And then the times that we don't, we're probably not going to get called for a foul. And we are just going to shut down your twos. And then KU is going to miss a billion layups. So you didn't shoot layups well in this game. In the end, Kansas goes 8 of 18, so below 50% on layups. That obviously is also not good. The 3-point defense was really bad. We knew coming in, Creighton takes a lot of threes. They hadn't been making a lot of threes, just 31%. We figured they were probably a better 3-point shooting team than that, though, and they were due for a reversion to the mean. Well, they had that reversion in this game. 12 of 29 from 3, 41%. Now, part of that was they were probably due for a reversion. Another part of it was maybe they got a little lucky that this will be a bit of an outlier performance for them. But also, I think above it all, like, there were a lot of open threes, especially in that first half, that Kansas gave up, and that continues to be a bugaboo for this Kansas defense. And when you have Hunter Dickinson out there, it's going to be harder to guard, the 3-point shooting, and the times where you did like hard hedge ball screens and you had Hunter chasing a perimeter player on the outside, they got like a dunk out of it because you ended up with Ryan Kalkbrenner rolling by. So it's like it's very hard to set up a good defense with the for this specific matchup, I should say, right? There are certain matchups that it doesn't impact you as much, but for a team who's just going to have like everybody shooting threes and is going to be taking 30 in a game and is going to stress you that way, it's really hard for KU to set a defense with their current personnel that is going to work well against that. And then above all and beyond, I mean, Kansas actually did a great job with turnovers in this game. It was 15-5 in turnovers. They led. Creighton had the 15. Kansas only had 5. They led 12-7 in points off turnovers. I know the rebounding battle doesn't look great, but that's just because Kansas missed a billion more shots. They missed 17 more shots than Creighton, so obviously that's going to be a part of it. But it's the shot selection in this one. Shot selection and shot distribution in this one are the ones that really come to mind. So you look at the shot selection. I thought this was especially bad in the first. The second half, it was just forcing the issue of layups that weren't always there. But at least maybe you can live with that a little bit more, because typically if you do that, you're going to get to the free throw line more. Again, didn't really happen in this game. And typically those are going to be higher percentage shots. In the first half, you were just taking some bad shots, I think in general, but also the shot distribution. DeJuan Harris shot 21 times in this game. Now, DeJuan's had some good offensive performances this year. You don't want him taking 21 shots. That's not part of his game. And in theory, if you were stacking guys up on this team in terms of who's your best bucket getters, DeJuan is not going to be, right? In theory, it should be AJ Storr. It should be Hunter Dickinson. It should be like Zeke Mayo. You don't want DeJuan taking 21 shots, right? The best part of his game is his defense, his facilitating, and that he can make some shots here and there that fit into the rhythm of the offense. So that was not great. You end up with Hunter Dickinson only taking 4 shots, and the KU 3 big men between Dickinson, Badunga, and Clements taking a combined 7 shots in the game for KU. And if you add KJ Adams into that discussion of big men, 13 shots from those 4 players compared to 21 shots for DeJuan Harris. So that's not great shot distribution. And I know Ryan Kalkbrenner is this really good defensive big man. He's going to limit shots on the inside, and their 2 4-men are 6'10", so they're clogging up the paint. But it felt like Kansas didn't really even try to get Hunter Dickinson on the block, right? It felt like they weren't even trying to post the ball. I don't know what was up with that, but you end up with a game where Hunter Dickinson has 6 points and only takes 4 shots. And I don't know if that was more on like the individuals, were they making, was it a decision to do that? Like, I don't entirely know. It definitely, I think, becomes a problem when if Hunter Dickinson is going to only be getting up 4 shots, it almost gets rid of the whole purpose of him being out there if he's playing 25 minutes per game. Because the whole idea of Hunter Dickinson is going to be that he is this unbelievably great offensive big man, that he has this great finesse, that he has this great post work and everything like that, that he's going to give you an advantage on the rebounding battle and as an offensive post scorer, and that you're going to be able to work your offense around that post scoring. Well, if he's only taking 4 shots, he's not having a big impact on the offensive end. And then if you're talking about, okay, well then how can he have a positive impact on the game? Well, we talked about this just a minute ago. This is not a good defensive matchup for Hunter Dickinson. A team that launches a bunch of threes and is going to spread you out. Bad matchup for Hunter Dickinson. So if he's not giving you anything on offense, it's going to be a problem on the defensive end. So just like so many things went wrong for KU in this game. Creighton was hot from 3. Pop Isaacs, who came in not having a single game. Pop Isaacs didn't have a single game in his first 8 games where he shot above 40% from the floor. He went 10 of 15 from this game. Now, a lot of those were wide open shots, right? Makes it a lot easier on him. Some of them were maybe got a good bounce here or there. Some of them were contested. He just made a good shot. He goes 10 for 15 in the game, 6 of 9 from 3. So, like, it's a combination of those things. I will say, if we're answering the question here, was this an indictment on Kansas or was this just a bad game? I think it is a little bit of both. I know that's cheating a little bit on the answer. But if you want me to lean toward one more than the other, I am right now just leaning toward it just being a bad game. Because it's happened just one time. Last year, it happened multiple times. It kept happening. And so if you go out on the road this weekend at Missouri and you lose again, then maybe we'll circle back to this and say, yeah, maybe that is an indictment of who they are. But as of now, the bigger sample size, that this is the one-off. They looked a little sluggish. They looked like they missed a lot of shots that they didn't normally make. You were without Rylan Griffin, who, I guess Kansas has been lost twice if you count the exhibition game to Arkansas, both in blowouts, both without Rylan Griffin. So maybe he's the most valuable player on the team for Kansas. That led to the first half wing minutes being a disaster. You got 2 combined points, 1 of 5, like 3 fouls from the 2 wings who were playing without Rylan Griffin in the first half. Now, Storr had a good second half, or at least a decent second half there. But, as of right now, I'm just leaning toward this being a bad game where you missed a bunch of shots, you missed a bunch of layups, you had a weird game plan. In a weird way, it felt a little bit like that Washington game at the T-Mobile Center like a handful of years ago. I think that was 2018. Just from the standpoint of, if you remember, like, they basically were like, we're going to only let LeGerald Vick shoot for your team. And that it was like that, but with DeJuan Harris in a different way. They played zone, and it was kind of a different way in how it went about. But this felt a little bit like that to me. And Creighton was hitting shots. Creighton always does well against number 1 teams at home, or like top 5 teams at home. That's just what they do. They were due for a big performance, and they kind of hit it. So as of right now, I am leaning toward that. But this definitely backs up some worries I had about the 3-point defense, and just how dominant of a team is Kansas. Number 1, are they number 5, whatever it is. Like, yes, absolutely on some of those things. All right, let's get to our game awards here real quick. I guess real quick, before we get into the game awards, I will say we saw a little bit more minutes from Marquise Passmore and Zach Clements in this one. I actually liked the Zach Clements minutes in this one. The Marquise Passmore minutes did not go super well. Starting to wonder if he's going to end up getting buried on the depth chart. I don't know. Maybe you can't afford to right now. Obviously, you can't with Rylan Griffin out as well, but it seems like it's going to take him another year to kind of come around here. I will say also, if we're talking about indictment long-term, like that basically zone where Creighton in the first half was just like, they did it all game, but DeJuan just shoot the ball. I'm not overly worried because, again, no Rylan Griffin. Not all teams have a Ryan Kalkbrenner in the middle for elite rim protection. And if DeJuan is shooting the ball from 3 at more career norms than what he has so far early this season, then it's going to be just fine.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Things go from bad to worse in Miami for the Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast.
They go into Miami on Thursday and they lose 134 to 93 in a game, Andy, that I actually think this is fair to say wasn't as close as the score might indicate.
This was an absolute disaster on, basically every front possible, because even if you were to try to look for something that provides hope, LeBron James, for example, at least offensively, he, like everybody, has to answer for what was just an abysmal, catastrophic showing on the defensive end. Like, LeBron actually broke out of his offensive slump, 29 points, 12 of 18 from the field, hit a 3. He hit a 3.
Yes, broke the streak.
Yes, that is now done. 1 of 4 from the arc, but that one breaks it. But, in the meantime, he had 5 turnovers and was a part of the defensive issues that were just at times laughable if your jaw wasn't so far on the ground that it couldn't move to actually make the laughing sounds.
Ha, ha, ha. I keep an informal statistic when I watch games, particularly now with the Lakers. Baskets I could have scored. And maybe people can't see, from here to here, maybe, my head, my face, my neck, I look like a decent basketball player. I am not. I am
I don't
terrible.
think anybody suspects that by looking
I'm
at your
just,
head.
I mean,
Nick.
maybe you just,
Wow, all these illusions shattered, Brian.
all Jordan over here, with his podcast. I'm not.
Yeah, we've been covering this team for like 20 years, and all these people have been wondering why you never played for him. Until
I'm
now.
a hooper. But you can be a decent hooper and not play professionally. I am neither of those things. I'm terrible. There were at least 3 baskets tonight in the game on Wednesday that I could have scored. Like, I was open enough that, and like the defensive pressure was non-existent enough that I could have stood in the lane, caught the ball, and gotten a layup. Would have looked like a small child doing it, but I would have scored 6 points in this game, Andy. I would have scored 6 points at least.
Okay, to your point, there was a third quarter moment where Duncan Robinson got the ball under the basket and was so uncovered, he actually panicked. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. This is so damn weird. And,
like he thought they were hiding somewhere and were about to ambush him from a different spot.
He ended up kicking the ball out, and of course, because Miami hit 24 threes in this game, they scored 72 points on threes alone. Of course,
say that number, Andy. They hit 24. The Lakers took 22.
Dude, they 24 threes in this game, 72 points on threes alone. I'm going to show you something crazy. I really want to emphasize, this is unusual for if you're not somebody who, like us, it's been our job to watch statistical trends, things like that. I wanted to look up Miami's 3-point percentage as a team, after this game. Mm-hmm. And I first went to ESPN.com and I looked at their number. And then as I was about to write it down, I was like, you know what? I'm not 100% sure ESPN will be up to date on this. I'm going to go to NBA.com because NBA.com is always up to date.
It updates very quickly.
Right. It's almost instantly. And on the left,
get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You can always turn a profit on a game between 2 sub-500 teams if you want. The Pacers head to Brooklyn to take on the Nets and are slight favorites. FanDuel has Indiana laying 2 points for tonight's tilt, if you want to call it that. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
There's nothing like a showdown in the AFC West. I basically said, hey, Chiefs and Chargers should both make the playoffs. I said, maybe there's a distant one. So far, so good. My predictions come true. There are 3 AFC West teams in the playoff hunt here, with Denver keeping themselves in it as well. Does that surprise you that these 2 teams are up top and there's 3 that could make the playoffs?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think the Broncos are definitely a little surprising. I don't know if I thought that 3 teams in the AFC West should make the playoffs and probably will make the playoffs just because of how bad the bottom of the AFC has been. You know, you have these teams who could keep potentially getting back into it with the Dolphins or the Bengals or these other teams, and they keep on losing and kind of separating themselves. And the Bengals, win a weird game, the Jameis Winston special on Monday night with the most Jameis Winston stat line of all time, but did show some flaws in that defense for sure. Bo Nix, obviously ahead of schedule, I think, but I did think it would eventually be the Chargers and the Chiefs. And I think the nice thing for the Chargers is just it does feel like they're a little ahead of schedule at 8-4. Yes, a lot of that is beating bad teams, but what a lot of Charger fans forget, that's never been a given with this team, right? And even with as you can see with the Chiefs, it's not always easy, and games are going to be close, and you have to show in those late moments that you can come through. And the Chargers did that last week. They did it against the Bengals, and against the Ravens, they were kind of shown to be a tier below where the top teams in the AFC are when they're at their best. So I think for the Chargers to be 8-4, and to have this chance, right? This is a game I've had scheduled, circled on the schedule for a while. The Chargers are 6-2 in their last 8, but nobody is going to give them the credit that they properly deserve unless they can go take this team down. This is the team. This is their last chance on the schedule to kind of get that statement win, to kind of have the Jim Harbaugh has arrived and he's ready to contend in the AFC West. Obviously, the Chiefs, all they do is win. But at least I think you feel like with Jim Harbaugh now, the Chargers are a real threat to be reckoned with. And I think the hard thing is like, this feels like a vulnerable Chiefs team. But like with the Chargers' flaws and what they showed last week, you want them so bad to be able to go take this in Arrowhead and win this game, but they have their flaws as well. And it's just going to be kind of a fight tooth and nail type of game.
And it's got to be the Titans of the division. They got to keep going. They are the top 2. So back to what you had said about Ladd McConkey. Running game, there's a whole lot of talk preseason that Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball every damn play. Not going to be a problem. Okay. In reality, the run game has not taken over that much. The pass game is still very much alive. Quentin Johnson is probably your second option there. What do we need to know about if Ladd can't go? What does this offense look like?
Man, that's a great question. And I think a question a lot of Chargers fans in their, deepest, darkest hours are wondering to themselves as they try to put themselves to sleep tonight, because Ladd McConkey was the entire offense last week. Like I've talked about on the show this week, he had 117 receiving yards. The rest of the Chargers skill position players had 88 combined. And a big part of that is because of the lack of identity that I think that has kind of realized itself in the running game. And it only gets tougher when you have someone like J.K. Dobbins hit IR, because even though it was a flawed running game, he was the best part of the Chargers' flawed running game, and at least he brought some explosiveness potentially to it, where he could be having a bad game. He could be 10 for 28, but then break off a 40-yard run, and it's like, okay, well, that's why you keep feeding him. That's why you do it. And I think with this game, if you look, Quentin Johnston, out of the last 3 games, 4 catches on 17 targets. They've tried to make him the secondary option for this team, but that's not going to cut it, right? And he did have the big high-profile game against the Ravens, 0 for 5 on 5 targets, 3 big drops, and you saw that confidence spiral out of control. And I think the big thing with Quentin Johnson now is if he can be more than just a guy that catches drag routes, because as they keep giving him opportunities down the field to make big plays, he's just not that receiver. He's not a receiver that's going to play through the contact, play through a defensive back, get you flags even when he can't come down with the completions. That's not what his game is right now. You really have to scheme it up for Quentin Johnston to be successful. Josh Palmer is a guy we've seen do it in spurts. That hasn't really realized itself. And I think when you have a guy like Gus Edwards, you say, hey, there is a strategy here. You pound Gus Edwards in December in the cold. You wear that Kansas City good run defense down, and maybe you can start getting some results in the second half where you have been a really bad second half team offensively. But even last week, Gus Edwards averaged more than 5 yards per carry. Still in the second half, they get away from it, and they're not as committed to it because they just can't stay on the football field. They only had 4 drives in the second half last week, and they only had 2 first downs. So it's hard to really pound the rock and make it count and wear a defense down if you're not going to stick with it. But this Chargers offense has been so inconsistent, and the drives just haven't been there for them to be able to give them that kind of pull to get a sense of whether or not this can actually be a legitimate running offense that, if you need them to, if Ladd McConkey can't play, can carry you for a week or at least keep you in a game.
I personally love the fact that we're talking about the run game in the AFC West. It's been a while, right? So
yeah,
back to how they should attack the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs' run defense has been great for the majority of the year, but the last 2 ball games, they've started to slip a little bit. And so that becomes, I think, the focal point. If you're trying to protect the quarterback on the Chiefs side, and you're trying to deal with maybe a lack of weapons on the offense on the Chargers side, do you think this could turn into a run fest?
It does feel like it could be kind of a street fight, bar fight, kind of drag out run fest for both of these teams. Because, I think if you're looking for where you attack the Chargers defense, it's definitely in the run game, right? Last week they did a good enough job against Bijan later on, but he, in that first quarter, it looked like he was going to run for about $180 in that game and score 3 touchdowns. And that's what happened to them the week before against Derrick Henry, where they just couldn't stop anything. And that lack of physicality that they weren't able to bring to that game really showed up in a big way. And I think for the Chargers, hey, if you can get that run game going, like if Gus Edwards can have that breakout game, the game you've kind of been waiting from him all season long, you're going to give yourself a good chance, and you're going to take some of the pressure that's on this offense right now because nobody is respecting the run. And when you have last week and guys aren't getting open in the second half, you have no semblance of a running game. It's going to look like it did, and they should have got goose-egged. They should have got shut out in the second half of the last game, but the defense gets a pick 6 and kind of bailed them out a little bit. But man, if Gus Edwards can get it going, like if he can be that physical guy that can actually get 15 to 20 carries this week and have a good game where 3 out of his last 4 games has actually averaged over 5 yards per carry, you might be able to do something here. But it's just so hard to kind of have the faith that they can do it. But hey, there's a path there. We just haven't really seen it enough to have confidence in it.
And, in Kansas City, the offense is always worried about the pass rush, always. Because we know that the default is throw the ball with Mahomes, but few teams in the league can come after them like the Chargers can. And in history, we know that there's plenty of plays to be had out there if they can get that matchup. The left tackle spot is obviously troublesome, but they've also had some trouble with penalties, offsides in particular, and not lining up in the backfield with their right tackles. If you had to pick a matchup, which do you think is right now where they want to put all their eggs in a basket?
Yeah, it has to be the pass rush, and it has to be getting to Mahomes. Like, obviously, with Patrick Mahomes, it's never just about rushing the passer, and I think that's one of the most underrated parts of his game is just like, you always have to be worried that he can get out, and if you send everyone, there's a chance he slips out of it, and there's a 40-yard play down the field. So you do have to kind of rein yourself in a little bit, which isn't good for the Chargers. The nice thing about last week is they had Kirk Cousins, who was an absolute statue, so it's like, hey, go eat. Pick that matchup, find the weakest part of that offensive line, and just get after it. But it has to start there. It has to be with whoever the Chiefs are starting at left tackle. Even if it's Joe Thuney, okay, hey, maybe then you attack his guard spot, whoever's replacing them there, and you see if that is the chink in the armor. But it is about pass rush. If the Chargers let him sit back there, he is going to tear them apart. And we've seen it happen against the Bengals. We saw it happen against the Ravens. If the pass rush isn't getting home, the Chargers defense is susceptible. And even though they've had really, really good numbers, it can kind of fall apart in a hurry to where, against the Bengals, it should have been 5 scoring drives in a row. Against the Ravens, it was 5 scoring drives in a row and 4 touchdowns. The Falcons last week should have started with 3 scoring drives in a row, and Kirk Cousins had a terrible pick, and Younghoe Koo missed a field goal. It's stopping those. Like, that's how you get out of that. If another team scored back-to-back times, that one timely sack can get you that stop that you need, and we've seen with Patrick Mahomes, they're an actual offensive line that can be susceptible to that. So I think going into it, that is easily the biggest matchup. It's like, hey, we trust our guys in the back end against that receiving core. Obviously, you have to give DeAndre Hopkins special attention. You know what Travis Kelce has always done against the Chargers, even in a lower year for him, a down year for him. You're always afraid of that, and he's always going to keep you up at night. But it's finding that weakness on the offensive line and trying to exploit it as many times as you can.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Texas is in the SEC championship in year 1 with a big rematch coming on Saturday against the Georgia Bulldogs.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, talking about Texas being in the SEC championship game. So many people, right, outside of Austin, outside of Longhorn Nation, so many people said that Texas was not ready for the SEC. That Texas was going to get humbled in the SEC, that Texas was in for a rude awakening, right? That was the narrative, that Texas, this wasn't the Big 12, and Texas was going to come in and struggle because you have to play this team, then this team, then this team every week. And that grind of the SEC schedule was going to be something that Texas could not handle. And now Texas sits here as the number 2 team in the country, the number 1 team in the SEC, 11-1 going into the SEC championship on Saturday. Now, of course, the overwhelming narrative where they've moved the goalpost to is Texas' schedule. And I'm going to be self-aware and say that Texas did not have the toughest schedule compared to maybe some other SEC teams, right? Texas did not go against Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, right? Some of the best teams in the conference right now, teams that are poised to get into the college football playoffs or right on the outside of it. So Texas did not have the toughest schedule this year. We can be self-aware and say that. But two things are true, right? Texas did not have a tough schedule or one of the toughest schedules, but still, Texas, to anybody who has watched college football this year with an objective eye, is one of the best football teams in the country. Texas is a damn good football team, regardless of how you feel about their schedule. This Texas football team has 11 wins this year, 10 of them by double digits. That's hard to do regardless of who is on your schedule. So once again, talk about, them playing Arkansas, who beat Tennessee, or talk about them playing Florida or Kentucky, who beat Ole Miss, right? Whatever you want to talk about their schedule, whatever you want to say about it. Michigan, who beat Ohio State, Oklahoma, who beat Alabama. The fact of the matter is, Texas handled these teams that ended up beating some of the best teams in the country, or we thought. And Texas is a damn good football team, period. End of sentence. Now, getting to the Georgia game on October 19th, Georgia beat Texas 30-15. To me, to my eye, it did not even feel that close. It just felt like Georgia outclassed Texas in that game. But thankfully, this Saturday, albeit in Atlanta, Texas has a chance to avenge that loss, right? And beat the only team that beat them on their schedule this year. And we have a bunch of data from that first game on October 19th to what Texas needs to do or what Texas needs to turn around to be able to secure victory in that game. So over the next two segments, my keys to beating Georgia now, right? I think the first thing, the most important thing, you have to limit or eliminate the turnovers. Now, the turnover margin only ended up being -1, but you don't want to be minus in the turnover margin in any game. But because you forced 3 turnovers from Georgia's offense, you only had a -1 turnover differential. But it's going to be hard in any game against any opponent, let alone Georgia, a national championship contender, to turn the ball over 4 times and expect to win that game, right? Quinn Ewers had 3 turnovers, and Arch Manning had a turnover in his short stint when he came in, when, Quinn Ewers just getting a breather to collect himself, right? That's what Steve Sarkisian was calling it, right? And what you did by turning the ball over 4 times was you put Georgia in some very advantageous opportunities to score points, right? Georgia was able to score 14 points off of those 4 turnovers from Texas. I'm surprised it wasn't more. But Georgia scored 2 touchdowns off of those 4 turnovers from Texas. And they only had to gain 47 yards on those 2 touchdown drives. One was 13 yards and one was 34 yards. So essentially, you're turning the ball over on your side of the field, and you're now giving this Georgia offense, you're putting them 13 yards away from the end zone in one case, and then 34 yards away from the end zone in another case, and they cash it in, right? Texas's 4 turnovers are probably the biggest reason that they lost that game to Georgia on October 19th. So I would say limit the turnovers. If you have one, you don't want to have more than one, but maybe if you have 1 turnover, it's football. It happens. What you cannot do is have multiple 3, especially not 4 turnovers the way you did against Georgia, because you will lose this game again. You have to protect the ball. You have to win the turnover margin in a big Titanic matchup like this against a team like the Georgia Bulldogs. And like I said, allowing the Georgia Bulldogs to score 2 touchdowns and only having to gain 47 yards to do it, that's absolutely criminal. But that's the position that Texas put themselves in a couple months ago. The second thing is this offensive line has to rise to the occasion. I think we were all surprised when we saw how the offensive line played in that game. I think throughout the first 6 weeks, the offensive line was really good. Of course, in the non-con, I think they went up there to Michigan and did a really good job. You had Mississippi State against Oklahoma. Trey Wisner averaged 9 yards a carry. I mean, we were just seeing this offensive line put on teach tape in terms of how to, block in the passing game, in the running game. And we talk so much about returning the starters, only having to replace Cam Williams, having, just a bona fide stud on the offensive line and Kelvin Banks, and what that meant for this unit. But like I said, the first 6 weeks, they were just moving people. And then it kind of felt like against Georgia and then Vanderbilt that next week, we saw this offensive line have a big drop off. We were surprised that this offensive line not only did not rise to the occasion against Georgia, but in some instances looked like they were getting bullied, right? Against that Georgia defensive line, against that Georgia front. It looked like they were playing, like they were toying with this offensive line, one of the best units in the country. I'm expecting them to take that personally and come back with a vengeance this Saturday and play one of their better games. And we've seen them the last 2 weeks against Kentucky, against Texas A&M, with this team rushing for almost 500 yards. They've been absolutely moving people. Even without Kevin Banks in the game, they've been absolutely moving people. Can you keep that momentum going into this game against Georgia? Obviously a different beast, but if they play the way they've played the last 2 weeks, then this Texas football team will have a great chance to win on Saturday against the Georgia Bulldogs. In that game on October 19th, 7 sacks were allowed. Now, a lot of, conversation was about, was it the offensive line? Was it Quinn Ewers not moving enough in the pocket? Was he creating his own pressure? Was he creating his own sacks? Nonetheless, 7 sacks, the offensive line has to be better. And then no push in the run game. I think, this Saturday, they're going to show up and we're going to see closer to what we've seen the last 2 weeks than what we saw against Georgia, where this offensive line was just completely unrecognizable. When you look at some of the Pro Football Focus data from that game, Cam Williams had a 49.7 overall grade, right? One of his worst games of the season, he allowed 5 pressures. It's not going to get it done. DJ Campbell had a 44.6 run blocking grade. That's well below average. That's not going to get it done. Jake Majors had a 59.6 run blocking grade. That's right below average, but you have to be exceptional when you play a team like Georgia. Hayden Conner had a pretty good game, according to Pro Football Focus, 69.8 overall grade. Did allow 2 pressures. And the same thing with Kelvin Banks, 78.6 overall. They graded him a little bit higher than I thought he played, but it's why Pro Football Focus makes a lot more money than I do. And he allowed 2 pressures in that game. And then Gunnar Helm, we know he's such a big part of what we do in the run game in terms of blocking, 43.3 run blocking grade against the Georgia Bulldogs. So this offensive line, Gunnar Helm, when they're in their blocking, they have to assert their will. They have to win the line of scrimmage. They have to be the unit that we've seen against Kentucky and Texas A&M, who's been absolutely moving people and allowing Trey Wisner to be one of the best running backs in the game and allowing Quinn Ewers the time to be comfortable, right? In these games against Kentucky and Texas A&M. Can't play the way that they did against Georgia the first time. They're going to have to come back and win that matchup, albeit against a talented front. This front for Texas, their offensive line is very talented too. They're going to have to come back and win that matchup.